Brain Scratchers. It's me again, John Lorden, back with another edition of Brain Scratch, and we're going into a very interesting case that has really been pulling not only at my attention over the past week, but pulling at my heart in a pretty unique way. I've never reviewed a case from what I consider the inside, having information that is very close. You know, I'm pretty much in the same boat as all of you. I can only glean the information that I can find, most typically online. And what happened a week ago was, as usual, I was reviewing the comments for an episode of Brain Scratch, and someone reached out to me there and said, would you please cover the story of my missing sister? And ever since, I have essentially been in contact, I think daily, with Sarah. Her name is Sarah Turney, and her sister is Alissa. These are pictures of some of the family right behind me. And Sarah has given me a lot of very direct access to information about the case, a lot of information about her experience and her thoughts and things that she's gone through around it, and even some very sturdy pieces of evidence for me to review. And it's been very different for me because, you know, in comparison to something like the Alissa Lamb case, there's not very much information to go on, and it really winds up being a lot more about reviewing other people's theories and either trying to prove or debunk them. And in this case, there is so much information to go through that it's almost like the Zodiac Killer case last week. My brain is just kind of in a scramble, so I hope you'll all bear with me. I'm going to do this in a multi-part format like I did last week, so we'll cover the basics. We will go into where the story has taken some pretty interesting twists, and then we'll round it all out at the end with my theories on what could be happening here. So to start off, this is Alissa that we see in these pictures here, and this is actually her father, Michael, and Sarah, the person that brought me into the case, is here with one of her brothers. And just to give you a bit of understanding about this family, it's a blended family. Barbara Strom was a woman that is the mother, the biological mother for Alissa, her brother John, and their sister Sarah. And there's three more brothers that came in with Michael Turney, and basically they all made this one family. Just so I get all their names out real quick. There is brother Rhett, a brother James, and a brother Mike that all came from Michael Turney. And as I understand it, for Michael Turney, this would be his third marriage, and ran into a pretty tragic end. Essentially, Barbara was diagnosed with cancer in 1993, I believe, and she died in 1994. And as we get to the time frame of Alissa's disappearance, there are only the two girls living with the father, Michael Turney. This is a page from missingkids.com, and I just wanted to show it real quick. Of course, I'm going to have contact, not just the usual links down in the description box below, but I'm also going to include contact information if you have any information that you can provide to help the Phoenix PD with this case. The contact info for that is going to be down below. But I wanted to bring up this page in particular because they did an age progression on Alissa here, and it kind of goes over the details pretty simply. She was missing since May 17th, 2001, and we're going to get into the details of that day quite a bit. From Phoenix, Arizona. Her date of birth was April 3rd, 1984, so she went missing at age 17. If she was, if we could find her currently, you would expect her to be 31 years old, and this age progression, I believe, is to 25 years old, so she might look a little older nowadays. She is a white female, brown hair, brown eyes, though she does lighten her hair a bit, so she might appear blonde or dirty blonde to some people. 5'4", 145 pounds. Now, ABC has done a lot of great coverage on this case. John Quinones, who you might know from, he has a show, I think, called What Will People Do? But he also does some pretty good investigative reporting. He has looked into this case. He actually interviewed Michael Turney. We're going to get to some of that information a bit later. But some of ABC's online materials are degrading. I mean, not degrading in terms of talking about the subject, but they're literally falling apart for some reason. YouTube videos that you could try to find on this case that are listed from ABC, the audio is missing on them, so I'm not going to include those links below, but if you do a search you can try to find that stuff. There is a special called 2020 on Investigative Discovery, which is a cable channel. So I will include a working link to one of those specials below. You might notice the voices sound a little funny in it. I think people are posting this stuff and trying to tweak it so it doesn't get copyright flagged by YouTube, but you could still at least hear all the evidence that is being discussed in that case. These two officers here are the ones that are working the case currently. You've got Stuart Somershoe and William Andersen. And if you see them interviewed, in particular this interview clip is pretty good about it, you definitely get a sense for their passion about the case. They really seemed interested in solving it. They seem a little perplexed, I think, at the lack of being able to solve it. But they have done a lot of work around this case. And it went through an interesting phase. Basically, when she went missing in 2001, this was just a missing persons case. Then something happens a little bit later and it changes the course of the investigation, which we will get to here. Just to give you some of the details, I'm going to read them right here from ABC News. On the last day of her junior year at Paradise Valley High School in Phoenix, Alissa was reported missing by her stepfather, Mike Turney, who told police he had picked Alissa up early from school, taking her to lunch, and then dropped her off at home. She seemed like she was happy, Turney said, of the father-daughter lunch. She was thinking about the summertime. But over lunch, a fight developed between Turney and his stepdaughter about his rules and her behavior. She wanted to be able to stay out later at night and not be accountable to where she was at. And I told her, as long as you're under my roof, we're going to have to check in with Daddy, because Daddy's a nervous wreck if you don't, he said. So here we start getting a little bit of the layout of that last day. Obviously there's a bit of a argument that's going on there. There is also some question about why he pulled her out of school early that day. This was her last day of her junior year in high school, and for some reason her stepfather decided to pull her out early, and even to this date I really don't have a good understanding of why he pulled her out of class early that day. However, I have seen a few other sources and confirmed with Sarah that the main story is he pulled her out from school early, approximately around 11 a.m. They drove to some place to get lunch. I'm not sure if they have lunch at the location and then go home, or if they just pick up lunch and take it home. I've kind of seen it written both ways. But in any case, at some point they get home, have this disagreement about how free she wants to be during her summertime, and he states that his last memory is her kind of huffing down the hall with her hair flying behind her back, headed towards her room. At this point, he decides that he's just going to leave the house and go run some errands, do some shopping, and eventually pick up Sarah, who is off at Waterworld, which I guess obviously sounds like a water park, as part of some kind of special trip for her 7th grade. I don't know if it's like a graduation trip or just a celebrating the end of the year trip, but essentially Sarah is at this water park that day. It is a school function, however. So he picks up Sarah. We're going to talk about, there's some points of contention about that a little later, and tells Sarah that Alissa is not picking up the phone. Would you try calling her? And gives Sarah his cell phone. Sarah tries to call Alissa's cell phone, and there is no answer. They get home, keep trying to call the cell phone. Apparently there is no answer, but I believe Sarah hears a buzzing, and they go into Alissa's room, and they find the cell phone right next to this letter. Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided that I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you didn't want me around. Look, you got it, I'm gone. That's why I saved my money. Dad, I took $300 from you, Alissa. And this is essentially the last piece of information we have that seems to be genuinely written by Alissa. I did talk to Sarah about the possibility of this possibly being hoaxed somehow, if someone else could have written it. Did they ever confirm that it was Alissa's writing? We don't have hard confirmation of that yet, but Sarah did actually send me another writing sample of Alissa's here. And, you know, I don't profess to be a handwriting expert, but there are definitely some issues if you compare how her first name is written here using this large lowercase a, as opposed to how she wrote it here with a proper uppercase A. Also, it's just nagging at me. The Y's, you can see she doesn't really create a tail that circles back. The Y's just kind of fall off straight down. And this occurs several times in this letter. And if you look at this example, she clearly hoops her Y all the way back under itself. Although it looks like she's practicing writing her name here, so it could be that she was writing it differently because she was trying to make it prettier for this instance of how she was writing it. So, like I said, I'm not an expert, but I did see a few things that just raised questions with me that I bounced back to Sarah, and hopefully she can get some clarification on. But I think I will attest this does seem to be written by Alissa. I think the thought that her father could have written in this type of font is a bit of a stretch, so I think we just roll forward considering that. However, there is a question of, was she led to write this, or did she genuinely write it of her own volition? And there's also a question of, when was this letter written? There's no date on it, there is no evidence to support when it was written. I asked Sarah if perhaps did they ever figure out what notepad this had come from. She doesn't have any information on that. So I don't know if this was necessarily written on that day. That's definitely a question that's hanging over my head, and I did bump into that with a few reporters that have looked into this case, that they were concerned about the same thing. They don't know if it was written on this specific day. And this is helpfindalissa.com. Once again, links are all down below. But this is actually a website that is built by Sarah for helping to find her sister. There's a lot of pictures here where you can see pictures of Alissa throughout the years. There are links to other websites that have commented on this case that might have some information that you might want to review. So please come check out helpfindalissa.com. And in the ongoing conversations I was having with Sarah, this is really a point that stuck out. If she is genuinely missing, or if something bad happened to her, in either case, for this investigation to really move forward, it is very important that we find Alissa. And I think Sarah nailed it with the name of this website, and that's also why I want to reach out to all of you and ask for any of your help, any of you brain scratchers that are in the Arizona area or even the California area. We have some suspicion, obviously, you know, in her letter she says that she's heading off to California. Please keep your eyes out and feel free to share any information that you can with the information I put in the description box down below, and maybe we can help find Alissa, which would make me a very happy person, particularly if we found her healthy and well. One thing worth noting before we cut into the next episode is Michael Turney. He has military experience. He also served a brief stint in law enforcement, and ultimately he worked a pretty lengthy career as an electrician and worked with an electrical union. And he is very caught up with some possible conspiracies that could have been happening around that union. As a matter of fact, one of his stories is that there were 2 assassins from this union that actually claimed that they had killed Alissa and buried her in Desert Center, California. So he apparently does have some issues that are looking psychological and looking pretty deep, and a lot of the family doesn't hold a lot of stock in his opinion about these two assassins or any of that story. But that's all going to come into play in our review on the next episode, the twists and turns in this story.